Working memory is one of the most important components of the brain as we currently understand it. Each of us is a brain trying to process information about the world and trying to control our body in order to communicate with other people and act in accordance with our goals. We are complex organisms who reason about the world and who make plans and execute them. We need a way to reactivate information in memory that's relevant to the current situation, and we need to control the processing of information so that it is task relevant. We also need mental spaces where we can work on information and make inferences about that information. All of these tasks are things that working memory helps us to do. We can think of the brain as like players in an orchestra, and working memory is the conductor within that orchestra. Working memory is the part of the brain where things get done, and it interacts with other parts of the brain. For instance, perceptual processes provide information to working memory. Information in long-term memory is activated by working memory, and response selection and goal-driven eye movements, for instance, are controlled by working memory. So working memory is an extremely general concept, but it seems to be handled in a fairly unified way by the brain. Working memory deals with the problem of distraction by focusing attention and inhibiting processing that is not relevant to the task. So what we see is very much an activation view of working memory, that it activates and controls other parts of the brain. Examples of working memory at work include remembering a phone number between the time of hearing it and actually dialing it, or doing the mental math required to figure out a tip at a restaurant. Another example would be holding directions in your mind when you are driving. For instance, take the third left and then the second right. Obviously, many modern devices like smartphones and navigation systems are reducing the load on human working memory, but there are still many tasks it is involved with. Working memory can be conceived of in terms of storage, so it's a store for retaining information over the short term. It can also be a place that activates information when we are performing mental operations, and it can be seen as a place to link stored and perceived information when performing tasks. And finally, it's a controller for focused attention. In order to carry out the various working memory tasks, there seem to be different components involved. And the three main distinctions are between a central executive that makes sure that tasks get done, modality-specific caches where sensory information is stored and reactivated, and an episodic buffer that holds information about what's currently happening, and that can also hold information about a past event from episodic memory that is reactivated. An example of a reactivated event in the episodic buffer might be remembering how your friend caught a fish the last time you went camping. So the central executive controls, directs, inhibits, shifts, updates, and maintains information from environmental stimuli or from long-term memory, and helps a person perform tasks. The phonological loop is a part of working memory that deals with sensory information involving verbal or acoustic information, and the visuospatial sketchpad maintains visual and spatial information, such as maps or mental images. Meanwhile, the episodic buffer is a temporary storage system that integrates information from a variety of sources with a sense of time and creates episodes or events. Working memory is closely associated with the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex in the front left side of the brain, but it also involves many other parts of the brain. Some of the principal ones are the occipital lobe, where spatial tasks are carried out, the articulatory control process identified with Broca's area, also part of the prefrontal cortex, and a visual cache, which is thought to be in the inferior temporal cortex, and finally the part of the phonological loop that involves hearing sounds, which is associated with Wernicke's area in the parietal cortex. So key points about working memory are that it's a system that activates other parts of the brain and carries out task-oriented activity. The different components of working memory include modality-specific components dealing with sounds or pictures, and others more abstract components that deal with concepts rather than sensory information. Working memory capacity is limited, and different people have different amounts of working memory capacity. And finally, a particularly important brain location for working memory is the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex in the front and side of the brain. It activates other parts of the brain that carry out various functions of working memory. In order to do this, it is highly connected with many other parts of the brain.